Good evening. Jacob Wetterling's family gets answers nearly 27 years after his disappearance.
Today in court, Danny Heinrich revealed in haunting detail how he kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling in 1989. Jacob was biking home from a store with his brother and a friend in St. Joseph when a masked gunman stopped them and took Jacob. It was less than a half a mile away from the Wetterling home. As part of a plea deal today, Danny Heinrich led investigators to Jacob's remains that were on this farm in the Paynesville area. In exchange for his confession, Heinrich will not be prosecuted for Jacob's murder. We have team coverage of today's confession. Esme Murphy and Jennifer Merrily were in the courtroom as Heinrich revealed the chilling details of this horrible crime. Liz Collin visited the place where investigators found Jacob's remains. We'll begin today with Esme.
Well, it was absolutely chilling in court. Jacob's relatives, some of them cried as they heard Danny Heinrich recount how he had abducted Jacob, handcuffed him, molested him, and shot him in the back of the head, as Heinrich heard on a portable scanner that law enforcement was nearby. Heinrich, in chilling detail, described how he kidnapped and sexually assaulted this young boy. He confessed to the murder. He said on the night of October 22nd, he happened to be driving on a St. Joseph road when he noticed three young boys biking past him towards a convenience store. He jumped out of, he waited for them to return. He pulled into a driveway, waited 20 minutes for them to come back. As they passed him, he put on a mask, jumped out, and ordered them on the ground and grabbed Jacob and told the other boys, he would kill them. Then Heinrich, after being sworn in, said that he then handcuffed Jacob hands behind his back, forced him into his car. Jacob said to Heinrich, "What did I do wrong?" Heinrich then drove Jacob to a gravel pit near Paynesville where he forced him to undress and molested him. When Jacob began to cry, Heinrich told him, "Don't cry." Heinrich then began hearing on a portable scanner that law enforcement was nearby. He then told Jacob that he had to urinate. He told Jacob to look away, and it was then that he pulled his snub-nosed revolver. The first shot, the gun did not go off. The second shot hit Jacob. He turned around, and Jacob was still standing after that first shot to his head. He then fired again, killing him. He left the body at that gravel pit. He returned around midnight and buried him in the gravel pit. Then he returned to that gravesite just east of Paynesville a year later and realized that some of the clothing was visible. So what he did is he unearthed the remains a year later, placed them in a bag, and then took them across what was then Highway 23 to the farm where he led investigators last week.
I was struck by a couple things. One, how predatory, how premeditated, how sick it was that he was targeting these boys. He went out of his way to trap them.
Absolutely. He also pled guilty today to the kidnapping and sexual assault of Jared Shirel 10 months before nearby Cold Spring, and he testified today that in that case he was cruising around Cold Spring looking for a child, looking for a boy to abduct. Absolutely predatory.
And it makes you realize what a monster he is when he told these things. A number of things have come to mind, and people are asking. First, he gets 20 years for this crime. A lot of people can't associate how horrible his actions are with a 20-year sentence.
Right. First of all, it's important to remember that the Wetterling family signed off on this just last week in return for the possibility, the chance of getting information about what they have been wondering all these years. Where is Jacob? Tragically, this story is so horrible, but they did get that answer. So that's something that they wanted. The judge also said in court today that even if he gets out, he would be subject to supervised release. He would also be subject, the judge said this today, to possible civil commitment. And I'm sure they're going to look at that very, very hard.
I would. Who knows where that stands 20 years from now? But people will never forget him and what he did, so that'll play a role in it. The other question, Esme, that I've heard a lot, and that's a good explanation of the legal thing, but a lot of people have been wondering, why was this DNA not tested before 2016? Why wasn't it tested in 89 or 90 or even 95?
Well, this kind of DNA testing that finally proved the match in the Shirel case really hasn't been available for, I would say, roughly more than 8 to 10 years. It wasn't tested, I think, because ever since 2004, there was a 12-year detour in which authorities decided and were convinced that the abductor had to be on foot. And it was at that time they never went back to this other set of tire tracks.
Even though they had its possibly a shoe print and possibly his tire track.
That's what we learned last October, is that there were, from the beginning, there were tire tracks and a shoe print that they identified as consistent with Danny Heinrich's. They never went back to that. They never went back to Heinrich in 2003, 2004. They instead insisted that it had to be somebody on foot.
They were on the wrong track.
And that, unfortunately, tragically, was the wrong track.
All right. Esme, thank you. We'll check